Hello, do not panic about anything. I've got books for you. I've been reading a certain amount. I mean, it's a bit hectic. So got about exactly seven books for you today. First up is one that I mentioned before, said I loved it, and I'm really just reiterating that. It's Snowflake by Louise Nealon, which you can see here, which is published by Manila Press, so that's Bonnier Books. And it is a debut, and it has been likened to Sally Rooney's Normal People, and I'm not really sure I'm entirely happy with that comparison, because she's a very different writer, and it's though we have similar experiences, it's not at all the same reading experience as Sally Rooney. And I do emphasise that. It does have that same element of a young, sort of ill-prepared, gauche, terribly naive young woman coming to Trinity College, and she's left a kind of rural Irish, you all know I love my Irish literature, Irish farm where it's anything but mired in the mud and clod. She has a very dreamy, little bit fey or totally fey mother who dreams about things that might happen, and she has a highly erudite and slightly, very alcoholic uncle, Billy, who lives in the caravan. And there's a lot of splurge of emotion and sort of not quite, people sort of missing each other but not quite. And it's all dependent on this young woman, Debbie, getting to a place of sort of understanding herself a bit better and understanding the world, and that nobody's perfect and we're all funny shapes and funny brains, and I'm no exception. I think I really loved it, in very unlike Rooney, in that it's not about trying to articulate, which doesn't happen at all, a relationship. It's about learning to understand friendship and family, and it's that which gives it huge heart. It's full of quirk. If you haven't picked it up, and if I haven't banged on about it enough in the shop, I apologise to Louise Nealon, because it's a cracker. It's a beautiful, beautiful read, and you won't regret it. So that's number one for today. Sorry, slamming my books down. Number two is Mark Brandi's The Others. Now, we know Mark Brandi, of course. This is his third novel, and this is published by Hachette, and it is Australian fiction. Mark's first two novels seemed to grapple with social issues that went just beyond or were woven into the lived experience of his protagonist, young Jacob, in this book. So he does this exceptionally well, I think, which is give us this viewpoint of child or a young person's viewpoint. And we have a very young, sort of 10, 12-year-old in this story who relates his experience to us from through a series of written entries in a diary. Brandi usually grapples with a rather heavier social issues, like he does in Wimmera and The Rip. We have got sexual abuse in the one, and we have homelessness and drug abuse in the other, and the sort of the nasty side of human nature. He's still very interested in the nasty and abusive side of human nature and its effects on the young. And I think he's very tender towards the young, and it's why we love him. And have great admiration for his writing. This one doesn't really weave so much into that social sort of cultural structure, and as a result is a bit more fluid and aerated. It might miss it a tiny bit, but I thought it had gorgeous flow. It is very chilling in places. This boy is kept removed from society, and his father has convinced him that that's for their own good, because there are others out there who have, obviously it's influenced by our current COVID situation, that there has been a plague. And you watch this shift of the boy's understanding of and love for his father, which never fades, which is a lovely, I think a lovely tribute to father-son relationships, even though there's a lot of stuff in there. But you watch him begin to sort of wonder about things, ask questions, and of course there have been boundaries set around everything. So some of those questions go beyond those boundaries. A fascinating exploration of what you do when you think you're keeping someone safe, what you're prepared to do. Very much loved that one. Highly recommended read. Great book club read as well. So, you know, it's not all joy, but nor is life. Ha ha! Here I'm being highly philosophical. Mott, Brandi. Next one up is a little one I picked up, sort of the Mad Women's Ball, you know, what's not to love in that title, what's not to love in that glorious cover, by Victoria Mass. And then I realised that it was a translation from a French novel, and it had been very highly recommended as a debut novel in French. At least, yes, highly recommended and best-selling. So I sort of, ooh, let's have an old, you know, gander into this one. It's published by Transworld Publishers, so it comes to us from Penguin Random House, and it is historical fiction. It's set in my century. I have to look at I'm very bad. I think it's 18 something. 85. I was about to say 1865, and I hate being wrong. 1885 in, it's located, it's Parisian set, it's very beautifully done, where we have a young bourgeoise. She's not aristocratic, a young bourgeoise called Eugenie, who's about 19, and she's got a brother, and she's got a little family unit, lives with her grandmother. But Eugenie is a little bit different from other people in that she sees ghosts, particularly the ghost of her grandfather, who at some point points something out to her. At some point she reveals this to a family member, and as a result of this, she's perfectly sane. She you know, views herself as being perfectly sane, but of course she is carted away to Salpêtre, which is the Mad Women's Hospital. So it's in the time of Charcot, who was working on hysteria and women being hysterical. And as it turns out, or I think this is what Mass is looking at, is that all sorts of women were carted off there because they were undesirable or inconveniences, or just troublemakers because they had opinions and voiced them, or believed slightly different things. And some of them had conditions that we would now recognise and treat differently, but Charcot was at the beginning of this. Absolutely splendid read. Sorry, I'll go back into the story because there's another woman called Geneviève who's the senior nurse, and Geneviève is very rigid and has put all her faith in science, which is a great thing. So we have this, it is a conversation about faith and what we believe in and why we believe it, because our young Eugenie believes in spirits, who was at that time of believing in spiritualism and mediums and all of that, and she definitely sees and hears and gets facts from these spirits. So we have this clash of ideologies, which is something that is timeless, of course. We're still exploring that now, and we will be forever. But once a year there's this ball where all of these inmates are dolled up, dressed up in all their finery or in costumes, and then the ball is open to Parisian society, where they can literally come and gawk. But some of them come to chat and exchange, but mainly it's about the freak show of these mad women, no matter how dressed up it was. It is a little gem. I think it's a very polished piece of writing. She's got lovely details. David's one comment about it was there were too many chignons. And of course my answer to that is, well, that's what women wore, and tendrils will always escape from chignon. And there were a couple of tendrils escaping in that book. It was a delight. And it's not a long read, so if you're feeling like you want to escape and get a bit of history, good setting, and of course she is taking on power and authority. You know, and the patriarchal society. We can never get bored of that. The next one up, I've missed up my thing. This is another stunning read. So we have The Good Wife of Bath, a mostly true story by Karen Brooks. Now, it's not her first book. This is about her 14th. And this is from Harlequin, an absolute, I loved it, historical fiction, but it really had something else. It has so much going for it, this book. A great big chunky read. Basically, oh my, you know, if you want to dive in, forget the world. It's really cleverly linked to Chaucer and his, you know, the tales, Canterbury Tales, where the pilgrims are all trotting off to Canterbury. And the Bath wife was wife of Bath was one of the characters that has been the most heavily disputed in studies of Chaucer. So was she a kind of vulgar you know, she's 5 times married, endless children, endless sort of financial situations, and at the end of her life she's, you know, going on these pilgrimages, and she's kind of bawdy, salacious, very self-assured, and lots of other things besides. She's a woman who contains a certain amount of authority. And people who looked at Chaucer's version of her thought that maybe it was he was anti-female, that he was sort of, oh, you know, she's aware of her body and she's basically a harlot, whereas other readings of the original Chaucer seem to bring her out, which is, I think, what Karen Brooks is looking at, as a woman who believed that, you know, if a woman has a certain amount of authority, the world will be okay. I'd like to repeat that sentence, that when women have authority, the world will be okay. Sorry, that's my one feminist blow for the day. Look, it's full of humour, it's full of sort of jokes, quirk, it's bleak, it's sad. No, it's not bleak. It gets sad in places, but all the time you're rooting for this character, Eleanor, who is married off at 12 at the beginning of the book, and that was not an abnormal age to be married off. And she's, you know, she's a hottie. She really is very aware of her body and her ability to interest men, and was taught very early on that was her value. She marries good men, bad men, they're not all good to her. Some of them are. She becomes wealthy, she becomes very poor, she becomes embroiled in all sorts of situations. But really it's more than just a romp, because she's doing a hell of a lot more than just doing that. She's got you know, it is about men and women, and because of that, it just makes it into a fascinating read. It's about her becoming who she is, and the last sort of third of her life in this story are about her living as a single woman, you know, that she didn't attach herself to men or become defined by men. It's very topical, very timely. I highly recommend that one. You delve into it, but my goodness, you get your money's worth. Gorgeous writing. It's really, really good writing. So loved that one, as you can tell. Next one up is When You Are Mine by Michael Robotham, and this is another one from Hachette. So it's a crime thriller. He has written 6 or 7 novels already, so we know where we are with Michael Robotham. And this is a standalone, so you don't, you know, you're not meeting characters that we've had before. Holy cow. Basically, I picked it up, and it is another one of those, and I've often said to you, I do read crime, and I love crime, and I really loved this one. He's nailed it. He's nailed an absolutely brilliant story, and a great protagonist. There's a great cast in this. You can tell he's having quite a lot of fun, but he is dealing with quite serious issues. I mean, crime is serious, isn't it? But we're dealing with, on one level, and it's not too sort of overwhelming or confronting. There is a little bit of domestic abuse, but it's not that. That's what introduces our main protagonist, who is a young Metropolitan Police officer who in fact comes from a background of gangsters. So her own father is a well-known sort of not quite on the right side of the law, and her beloved uncle's same. That there's this sort of clan, and they're a clan who she has sort of separated her, distanced herself from, because she believes in the law. Comes across a young woman, Tempe, who's been assaulted by someone, and the person who's assaulting her is a renowned police officer. So there are these 2 characters in this girl's life who become psychologically interesting to us as we're reading, because we're never really very sure where we stand with them. And I think this is what I like about Robotham's writing, is that it's, you know, you're getting a great narrative, a great story. It goes from A to B, you get resolved, you know, gets resolved, there's a result. But you never quite see, blurs these lines between what's good, what's bad, what is a stalker necessarily always a bad thing? Is there never any positive side to the attachment that a stalker might make to someone? Who was stalking who in this? Who was sure or not sure of their relationships? Was that police officer, Darren Goodall, was he all bad? Did he do the things that it just looked obvious that he did? It's very interesting. There is a murder, and there is, as you worked out, there's stalking, and there is a lot of, because she's taken on a police officer in the police force, there's a lot of sort of corruption dealt with. But so the corruption is everywhere. So he really makes you ask those questions about, well, which side, you know, who's a goodie, who's a baddie, basically. It's a ripper. You shoot through that one. It's perfect for days like we're having at the moment, where it's cold and we need something good to read. Go for that one. It's a stunner. Now, slightly different, because I don't very often do non-fiction writing. And I picked this one up because I love blue and white covers. That sounds totally facetious. I don't mean it to be, or frivolous, but Ingrid Horrocks, so Where We Swim, Explorations of Nature, Travel and Family. So this is published by University of Queensland Press. And I think it's mostly Horrocks writes from New Zealand and starts the book with this glorious opening of, you know, how the mouth of a river has drawn her in. And as a reader, you're drawn in already. It's a very elegant and gentle wisdom in this book. I think it nudges us, and that's her point, to have a look at why we can't just swim everywhere. Where are the places we can swim? Where is the water clean? And I think part of the reason for writing about this is to get us to look at our planet. Now, you know, we get fatigued, I will admit, to being asked all the time to look at how the climate is a disaster, and I think most of us would like to do, you know, burrow under the duvet and not have a look. So if you want to have a book that is not going to sort of hold up this image of perfection about what we should be as humans and what our planet should look like, but want to have a very gentle, very wise and thorough but inviting exploration into place and into love of place, and how we must, see, these are the words I'm trying to avoid, how we can encourage our children to understand and love the planet that we have. And she does it through swimming, even though she says herself, which I love, she's not a swimmer. But she becomes interested in bodies of water, very interested in bodies of water and in immersion. So this idea of immersing ourselves in our own planet is throughout this book. But her writing is lyrically satisfying, reassuring, and it kind of sort of invades you or pervades your thinking. It's a book I'm picked up and put down several times. You know, it was kind of a late night reading delight, even though it's dealing with something that's quite upsetting in a way, you know, our planet. So how she did that, I do not know. Well, I do, it's her poetics, but gorgeous. Gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous read. And the last one up is this one. It's called Hell of a Book by Jason Mott. And this one comes to us from, again, it's Hachette, Orion Books. Now, he's written a couple of books before. I haven't finished it. I picked it up because I said, well, you can't walk away from that title, can you? And from the colour of that cover. He has been a New York Times bestselling author with The Returned, I think. I'm not sure what year. It's American fiction, and it's a whooping sort of sachet of a read, which is an astonishing thing, because Mott writes with a kind of nonchalance and presents us with a sort of a little bit of magic realism. So we get writing that's a little like Beattie's The Sellout or Colson Whitehead, perhaps less humour, because Beattie's very, very humorous. But there's a lot of tongue-in-cheek in all senses in this book. It's quite funny. But sorry, I have so distracted myself by saying that. I'll try and wipe my brain and say that sentence again. But yes, his nonchalant writing has kind of allowed him to deal with topics that are heartbreaking, very serious, and very much the African-American narrative that we read so much of. Now, sometimes I get sort of like, oh, you know, African-American reads can sometimes be very bleak. The ones that include magic realism I find very convoluted and complicated, and I have to work quite hard. There is no work reading this book. He does the work for you, and that is an amazing gift as a writer, I think. It's just, you plunge in, again we go back to swimming, but it's being in a warm bath in a way, but he is lulling us into a false sense of security, because he is going to deal with the Black experience, with the shame of being a young boy and being a very dark Black like black is what they call it in the book. You know, black where he's stolen all the darkness from the sky. So we have a little boy called Soot. Well, he's not actually called Soot, but it becomes his nickname. And you don't know which timeline, if it's, you know, contemporaneous, if it's the same time, different time, whatever. You have an author who's doing his book tour, and man, does he have so much fun. I mean, he's into every vice, every bit of fun, every pleasure, but it's never salacious, it's never vulgar, it's just fun. But the young boy is bullied. The author has written this bestseller and he's on an author tour, so he's kind of looking at being an author and what you get up to, and that journey of writing one hell of a book. And that's the title of the book that the author has written within the story. So we're doing this sort of mise en abîme thing, which is rather clever. And then there's this child called the kid, or this apparition or person, this child who every now and then turns up and eats at the same table, and there's a physicality to him, but it's about being seen. Is that child, so in our three characters, we have Soot, we have the author, and then we have this kid who he sees or doesn't see. Who are they? What is their relationship? Are they all one person? And I think that's what he's asking. He's asking how much of us are made out of our trauma, and how much of us is memory, how much of us is imagination, and how much is our lived experience impacted or created by those three things. It's a highly powerful read in that it's so easy, and it's very darkly funny, and other times blatantly funny, but he's got so much poignancy. As far as I've got, there has also been a child shot somewhere. There's been some dreadful drama, and we keep sliding off it. He's very clever. He blurs every boundary between knowing and not knowing. I must admit that of not of all of them, but in that vein of African American writing, it's one of the most enjoyable, and yet singularly sort of fiendishly clever reads. You know, that has devastating truth covered up in all of this sort of apparent sort of nonchalance. Brilliant. Right, I've said enough clever words there in one sentence for you. That's my pile. Have a look at that. Isn't that just the beautifulest thing you ever saw? Now, these are all currently in the shop. I haven't got round to starting on the next lot of books that aren't in the shop yet, will be soon. But of these, there isn't one that I can't recommend without my hand on my heart and saying it's just a fabulous read. How lucky are you? See you next time.